Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Monday, February 3, 2020 Sioux Falls City Council meeting. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to everyone who's joining us here in person and those joining us online. Thanks for being here. Clerk, let's please read our roll.
Council members Sale.
Here.
Starr.
Here.
Staley. Brecky.
Here.
Erickson.
Here.
Kiley.
Here.
Neitzert.
Here.
Selberg.
Here.
All right, I'm pleased to welcome back Pastor Kevin Schneider from Good News Church. He's been with us before to give our invocation, so thanks for being back here, sir. I'd ask that you rise for that invocation and stay standing for our Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Before I offer the prayer, one of the things that I was thinking about was the word dwell. What does it mean to dwell together, to live where we live? And I like history, so one of the things that I did is I went back and I did just a little research on Sioux Falls and thinking back to the fact that it wasn't until 1856 that the first pioneers began to live right here in this area. And it wasn't until 1880 that Sioux Falls had about 2,100 people. And then in 1889, Sioux Falls became incorporated as a city. And to think that here we are 164 years later, and now we're moving towards 200,000 people. And I got thinking, and one of the things that, again, I like to read, I like to do things, so I began to do some research about our council and where everybody is from. And so, Janet, I read that you were from Doland, South Dakota. And let's see, right, Greg? Oh, you know what? Yours didn't have it. Neither did Rick. You didn't have where you were from. Let's see, Hendricks, Minnesota. Worthington, Minnesota. Rapid City. I believe, Kurt, that you were from Sioux Falls because I know your dad and grandfather were important with Morels and now Smithfield. So, and then Pat, I believe you were from like Canton and Yankton, and I've been in Sioux Falls since 1987. I actually grew up in a small town in northwest Iowa, but was thinking about what does it mean and how amazing is it that we all dwell. We've come from different places, and yet God has allowed us to all dwell here in this amazing place called Sioux Falls. And because of that, I thought of these words, and they come from Isaac Watts, who in 1708 wrote these words: "O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come." These words were inspired by Psalm 90, which reminds us, "Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God." So, may the Lord continue to be our dwelling place, and may I pray for you this evening as we begin. Father, thank you for this time together. And Father, I am grateful for the men and women who give up their time and their talents and their energy, Father, to lead this great city. Father, tonight I pray that in all they do and all that they say, Father, you would guide, guard, and direct their hearts, and you would allow them, Father, to lead as you would lead. Give them great wisdom and insight, and Father, may you then bless the work that is before them. For we are grateful for the place called Sioux Falls, and God, all that you have given us here. We love you, we thank you, and God, tonight in the midst of this meeting, we worship you, for it is in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks. Thanks for allowing me. Told Kevin, I'm glad that's all he found on the internet, you guys, so it's good. I know there's more out there. All right, we'll move on to item 4, which is our consent agenda. Look for any changes or motions.
Move approval.
Second, Kylie.
All right, motion approved by Counselor Selberg, seconded by Kylie. Any discussion, council? All right, we'll take a vote on that, please.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes. All right, that passes 7-0. We'll move on to our regular agenda, number 18, item 18. Look for a motion on that.
Move approval.
Second, Neitzert.
All right, motion approved by Selberg and seconded by Neitzert. Any discussion or amendments on that, council? Councilor Neitzert?
Motion to amend the regular agenda by moving items 29 and 30 to immediately following item 24.
All right, got a second on that?
Second.
All right, motion by Councilor Neitzert on that, seconded by Councilor Sale. Any discussion? We'll take a vote on that, please.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes. All right, that passes 7-0, so we're on to back to the amended main motion. Any other amendments to make? All right, then we'll call for a vote on the agenda as amended.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson? Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes. All right, that passes 7-0. We're on to the general public input portion of our agenda for this evening. As a reminder, input during this portion will last no more than 3 minutes per person, and in total last no more than 30 minutes. During general public input, the public is welcome to speak on any topic that does not appear later on in our agenda. For regular agenda items following general public input, comments are limited to 3 minutes, unless the item is being presented for final adoption, in which case public input is limited to 5 minutes. For all regular agenda items, comments are limited to the agenda item under consideration only. At this time, I'd like to invite members of the public forward for general public input. And clerk, please note our time is 7:07.
Sarah Broussard, Sioux Falls. I want to stress so bad to this police department and to the mayor on human trafficking by labor. I have got a hold of Polaris Project. They have got a hold of the FBI, and they will do their own sting operation. It is very serious what's going on Village on Louise and 41st Street. We have illegal immigrants that are being human trafficked. I have evidence that she's acknowledging that she's a monger. I have bank statements that she is housing these people in a commercial property and onto a apartment complex. I had made people call in to the police department and ring the phones up, especially the people that's behind there on Village of Louise that are complaining about it. It's been 3 weeks in the making. I understand that the police department is short-staffed. They're being pulled in many directions. When it comes to human trafficking by labor, we need to take this serious. This illegal immigrant and these massages are turning up to prostitution. We need to take it serious. I shouldn't have to call the Polaris board to get the FBI involved to get these people to do their own sting operation here. Now, I called the Worthington School District. One of the people that is a monger, his position is fixed to no longer be with the school district after 24 years. So what they do is they went to court and tried to put a restraining order on me, and the judge denied it. This is what we're going through on the streets. These people that are complaining are rich people. All of y'all, that's for the rich people. On by 57th and Louise here, Village of Louise. Bar 3, Juice Stop, Midco. All these people are complaining. All these people are ringing the phones to the police department. We need to get street crime unit in there to do bust. The Polaris Project will do their own sting operation with the FBI. I cannot stress to y'all, Mayor, you said that you was on crime here. It's really bad. We got 5 of them. 5 illegals here to pay a debt that she is housing for $710 a month in an apartment complex. I have recordings of the conversation. I spoke to her for 51 minutes on a telephone conversation, and I have her bank statements. This is a licensed massage therapist that is doing this. We need to address this with the police department, Mayor. I had been ringing up that police department's phone all week, last week. It is really bad here.
Thank you. Anyone else this evening for public input? All right. Seeing none, we're going to move on to our next item, please.
Item 20 is transfer of a 2020 retail liquor license with video lottery terminals and 2020 package liquor license from Badlands Gaming LLC, Badlands Gaming 1600 West Russell Street to South Dakota Veterans Alliance Incorporated 1600 West Russell Street. Item 21 is a special one-day malt beverage and special one-day wine licenses for Boys and Girls Clubs of the Sioux Empire to be operated at 8th and Railroad Center parking lot, 401 East 8th Street for a winter carnival on February 8th, 2020. Item 22 is a special one-day liquor license at T-Slat JJ's Wine, Spirits, and Cigars to be operated at Montgomery's 1725 West 41st Street for a chamber mixer on February 11th, 2020.
Thanks, Tamara. Good evening, Jamie.
Good evening, Jamie Palmer with licensing. I'm happy to answer any questions you have on items 20 through 22.
All right, thank you. Anyone from the public wishing to speak on any of these topics tonight? All right, counselors, do you have any questions for Jamie on any of these three items?
Move approval, Erickson.
Second, Kylie.
All right, motion approved by Counselor Erickson, seconded by Counselor Kylie. Any discussion, council? All right, we'll take a vote then.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzert?
Yes.
Elberg?
Yes. All right, that passes 7-0. We'll move on to our next item.
Item 23 is a second reading. An ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota rezoning property located at northwest corner of East Madison Street and North Veterans Parkway from the RS Single Family Residential Suburban, RD2 Townhome Residential Suburban, RA2 Apartment Residential Moderate Density, RA3 Apartment Residential High Density, LW Live Work O Office, and C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar Districts to the RS Single Family Residential Suburban, RD1 Twin Home Duplex Residential Suburban, RA2 Apartment Residential Moderate Density, RA3 Apartment Residential High Density, LW Live Work, S1 General Institutional, CN Conservation, C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar, and C3 Commercial Community Districts, number 11263, 2019, and amending the official zoning map of the City of Sioux Falls. The Planning Commission recommends approval 7-0.
Evening, Jason.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Jason Bieber representing Planning and Development Services. This is an application by RMB Associates represented by Joel Dykstra. It's located at the northwest corner of Veterans Parkway and East Madison Street. The proposal in front of you is to zone this property for future commercial, office, apartment, and single-family residential uses. Also, there's a future Brandon Elementary School, which is roughly 7 to 10 years down the road. And there also is a site the city has purchased for a future 198-foot city water tower on it. First reading, we did have some confusion on some adjoining subdivisions and kind of what we're talking about tonight and what the existing subdivision to the west is. Tonight, you guys are looking at the proposed rezoning, as I indicated, for Golden Gateway. It's outlined here in yellow. Some of the neighbors in the subdivision to the west, that's outlined in red. That's Canterbury Heights. You'll probably hear from some of the neighborhood tonight. And that is owned by Stone Arch Partners, represented by Steve Van Buskirk. This is kind of a quick slide here of how these subdivisions will kind of fit together in the future. You can see Paddington connects to the east over to Veterans Parkway, and Tahoe Trail will connect also to the east through Joel subdivision, and then Highline Avenue will connect south down to Madison Street. As part of this, these two developers working together, Golden Gateway has agreed to run the sewer line number 1 on the south, as you can see here. That will service half of some of the lots in Canterbury, half of the lots on Marlowe Avenue. As part of this, to facilitate to speed up the construction of Marlowe, which the neighbors in Canterbury have requested for several years, RMB Associates has also agreed to front the money and run actually sewer line number 2. This will then service the rest of those houses along Marlowe Avenue, and that will allow Stone Arch Partners in the Canterbury Heights neighborhood to construct Marlowe and Tahoe, and they've agreed to complete that in 2020. and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thanks, Jason. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this topic tonight? Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Joel Dykstra, 404 East 77th Street in Sioux Falls. I am representing the applicants here. This is a project that has been a long time incubating. I first became involved with this property 10 years ago when the then developers failed and disappeared, and we, representing some of the investor group, we took this over, we resurrected the partnership, we refinanced it, and we set our minds on, frankly, 10 years of making payments with very little prospect of selling anything during that period of time, and that is what we have done. The only sales we were able to do during that period was, frankly, the right-of-way for Veterans Parkway, which we're very pleased to be able to support. There is some BMP, the green on the east side, either side of Veterans Parkway is land acquired by the city of Sioux Falls for detention ponds and drainage, part of their flood management system, and the water tower lot that the city of Sioux Falls acquired in preparation for that. More recently, just in November, we were able to close the sale of 20 acres to the Brandon Valley School District, which ultimately will include a city park. Sioux Falls City Parks Department will acquire the west half of that, as is the usual pattern. And so we're happy to be able to get that done with working with Brandon Valley Schools. The rest of the development, we are committed to, we were originally committed to do the south sewer line, or what was called sewer line 1. And we have more recently agreed to step out in hope and faith and build a second sewer line extension. That one is really only there to facilitate the construction of lot and service of lots that will allow the construction of Marlowe Avenue. Doesn't do anything for us really, unless somebody comes along and wants to buy the lots along that line, in which case we would normally wait and build that sewer line later when there's some desire for those lots. But we've agreed to do that. Our ownership group has agreed to do that in advance to facilitate the further completion of the streets over on the Canterbury Heights area. We did rezone this area in 2015. The zoning application before you is really kind of a tweaking, I guess, of that to match the way things are developing now that the highway is in place. And so we're orienting that zoning to more mirror the actual development, with Powder House Road, or former Powder House Road, being a major part of the north-south access. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thanks, Joel. We'll see if there's other public input on this topic here tonight. Come forward, please. Good evening.
Good evening, Steve Van Busker, Van Busker Companies, 2571 Southwest Lake Drive, Sioux Falls. Thank you for having me this evening. I'm here to speak in favor of this application this evening. We've had our involvement kind of similar to Joel's involvement. Started about 10 years ago when the same failed developer on the other side of the power lines, there's an investment group there, came to us and said we needed some help trying to get this thing finished up. So we became involved and been trying to work through this thing slowly but surely over the course of the last several years. So I think tonight's action, if we were to go ahead, sets us up nicely because we've got the banking in place, the financing in place to build this Tahoe and Marlowe out, which is the primary desire for access into the neighborhood, in conjunction with the Tahoe that Golden Gateway has agreed to pave out to Highline Avenue, so there'd be a second connection out to Madison Avenue. So for that reason, it allows us to move forward and help finish up this neighborhood in a more timely manner. I just, a couple things. So we've, been working nicely with Golden Gateway. Mentioned the school sale up there. We've been working closely with them here in the past on fire access, and again here recently. So we've had a nice working relationship back and forth to work together on fire access. Golden Gateway has been helpful as part of this. They've got the detention basin that the city now owns, but we got to drain our water across them. So they've agreed to allow us to do that. So that's no longer a roadblock for us. The sewer lines, line 1, line 2, that gets us the green light to go build more streets, because we got sewerable lots, we got developable lots. So frankly, with a go-ahead tonight, we can continue ahead. If the city council said no tonight, we can't develop any more lots or any more streets out there. So that's a good thing as far as the partners of Stone Arch are concerned. So I'd also like to speak to, I had one phone call from a neighbor. You all had that letter, and I know that got circulated out to the neighbors. I did have one phone call wondering whether or not the Stone Arch group would continue on and fulfill their obligation to move forward. They have every intention. Is kind of in the last 60 days or so, kind of after the first of the year, the idea of line 2 sanitary sewer came about. So it took us a little bit of time to get everyone back together, because it's a loose group. It takes time to get everyone together, but they met, looked at putting a loan in place and investing more money than they had anticipated prior to, with the smaller project that you first heard about on Tahoe and Cossington Court. So they expanded the scope of the project with that line 2 coming up to get that Marlowe built, because they know that's one of the big issues that everybody has. And I was also asked on the phone, will the Stone Arch people see this thing through? Will they really do what they're promising in that letter? And all I can tell you is, my experience, when they say they're going to do something, they get it done. When we first got going around 10 years ago, I was having meetings with city engineering saying, you got to fix the sanitary sewer out here, you got to fix the storm sewer out here, you got to fix the detention areas, you got to put second lift of asphalt. So all this stuff was not done at the time when other developers were folding up their tent and handing the bill to the city of Sioux Falls saying, hey, we're done, we're leaving, we're out of business, you guys got to clean this up. The Stone Arch group did all that, 10 years ago. They hung in there and they did it. It took time, they had to sell stuff and get it done, but they got it done. Then about, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, there's a big action with the 40-acre sale up to the north, which with that, the city council saying yes to that deal, that allowed, that construction gravel road to get built, some of the promises that were made in that meeting. And an additional promise, there was a bus turnaround that kind of showed up after it was all said and done, after that 40-acre sale, and the partnership went ahead and built that bus turnaround to make that work, because that's what the neighborhoods are asking. So again, they stepped up and did what they could at the time, and they fulfilled it. So that's my experience with it. That's the city's experience with this group. They've made commitments in the past, and they've held up to them. So I would ask you to support Golden Gateway's action tonight, so we can keep this going forward and get this neighborhood done. Thank you. Any
All right,
questions?
thank you, Steve. Go ahead and have a seat, and we'll call you up if need be. Any other public input on this item here? All right, councilors, do you have any questions for? Oh, come on up, sir. Good evening.
Todd Miller, 1513 North Paddington Trail. After years of working on getting a north-south road access to Madison Street, I'm pleased to see the first proposal ever that is to finally complete Marlowe. And I want to thank all the people involved with reaching an agreement to complete this prior to the winter of 2020. My concern is that there is a lack of recourse if this letter of intent does not materialize. We have history here, and there's an applicable quote that says something like, "Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it." I hope this is not the case, but I want to explain my skepticism for those who don't know the history here. In 2006, Phase 2 and 3 of Canterbury Heights was approved by the city with a stipulation that Tahoe and Highline were to be gravel graded and maintained year-round. What really happened was the lots were developed, but the roads were not. This left the neighborhood with only one access. Fast forward to 2014 and 2015, is a rezoning request was made for approximately 100 acres north of Canterbury Heights called Canterbury North. We pointed out at that time that there was only one way that there was to get there was via Paddington Trail, and that road was already being used as a collector street that was not designed to be one. Additional traffic, especially construction traffic, would be a tremendous safety hazard for our children. We engaged with the city council, and to their credit, most of them came out and visited the neighborhood. We brought up to city officials that we had no second access or exit from our neighborhood. We asked city officials what happened to the agreement to develop Tahoe and Highline in the phase 2 and 3 approval, and we're told that it was just a suggestion that they do those roads. We addressed the fact that the Sioux Falls schools refused to send a school bus to pick up our children because there was no way to turn around. In August, a proposal was presented to us at a public meeting, and Jason, if you would put this on there, please. In that meeting, it was proposed that the meeting was proposed to have Notley completed in 2015, Claremont and Tahoe in 2017, as well as connecting Highline to Madison. The final item listed was that the City of Sioux Falls, Stone Arch Partners, and Golden Gateway agreed to eliminate basically 80% of Highline Avenue. This was supposed to be a 100-foot wide road that was supposed to go north and south, with the cost shared by Stone Arch Partners and Golden Gateway extending north all the way to the top of both neighborhoods. Before we knew what happened, that proposal disappeared. The only part that did happen was that Highline Avenue went away. None of the roads were developed that were in that agreement. As a consolation prize, we did get the Notley graveled road that Steve mentioned, so that the bus could pick up our children, and a winding gravel road was built to allow mostly construction traffic to enter from Madison Street, connect to Marlowe, and allow the development of Canterbury North. So in good faith, we removed our objection, and the rezoning was approved because we're pro-development. So while I'm excited to see the Marlowe is intended to be built, I think it is negligent to forget the major north-south road Highline elimination and its impact on how the roads need to be configured when approving the Golden Gateway development road plans, which I'm not sure is a part of tonight's meeting, but that is the biggest bugaboo. I'm for building Marlowe. Steve, in case you were wondering. We believe the efficient north-south flow of traffic is again ignored in this neighboring development, and that even with Marlowe, much traffic will ironically flush out onto Paddington and Tahoe to the west, because that is the direction to Sioux Falls. We know subdivision plans are subject to change and think that Rosemary needs to flow directly to Highline rather than backtrack to the east toward Powder House. This was suggested to the developer and rejected. That will encourage most of Golden Gateway traffic to exit via their own roads. We are told that doing that could have traffic move too fast because of the length of that road. But ironically, this plan makes Paddington the longest continuous road in the entire neighborhood, the very same street that has borne excessive traffic for several years. So in addition to the change to Rosemary, we would ask that there be stop signs placed on Paddington on both the east and west side of Marlowe. Hopefully this will encourage people to turn south on Marlowe rather than just staying on the continuous narrow street called Paddington. I believe that development is generally good and appreciate the revenue it provides our city. But the long-lasting revenue is actually paid by us homeowners, and we feel that responsible traffic flow should be just as important as what may seem practical for a developer. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Todd. Anyone else to speak on this topic tonight? All right, councilors, do you have any questions for city planning or any of the developers that are here tonight? Councilor Kiley.
Actually, I don't have any questions, any comments, so I guess if anyone has questions, I'll allow them to go ahead of me.
Any questions? Would you like to make a motion, Councilor?
Yes, move to approve.
Second, Night-Cert.
All right, motion approved by Councilor Kiley, seconded by Night-Cert. Discussion amongst the council on this one? Councilor Kiley.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Joel and Golden Gateway for their efforts on their development, and remind my colleagues that that's what we are voting on tonight, the rezoning for that development. However, the rezoning of that development greatly enhances the ability to proceed with the build out of Marlowe Avenue as it was presented. It extends the sewer lines, and without those sewer lines, it's not likely that that's going to happen. So I do appreciate Joel and his group's effort to go the extra mile, especially with sewer line number 2. And then also Steve and the Stone Arch Group for indicating that they will build out Marlowe Avenue. And we did receive the letter the morning of the first reading on the 21st of January, and it is pretty clear in there that their intentions are to do just that. And of course, that is contingent on approval of this this evening. So I would encourage my colleagues to vote yes on this.
Thank you, Councilor. Other discussion amongst the council on this? Councilor Neitzer.
First of all, I concur with everything Councilor Kiley said. I do want to bring up something that was a bit of a curveball to me that was brought to me by a citizen last week, and that's why you see this item, the future 198-foot city water tower. And what that citizen brought to me was their concern that the city has invested, I think, about $1.5 million on a 30-inch water main that goes several hundred feet up adjacent to Veterans Parkway. And we've also purchased land here to do a water tower. And what their concern was, which I share, is that people would potentially make purchases in here and not be aware that that water tower was coming. So thinking about it, I contacted Public Works, and I believe I have their commitment to put some sort of signage on Powder House Road there that will say future site of city water tower, kind of like we've done with the electrical substations. So, and very prominent, and it'll sit there. The water tower may not happen for several years, but then it's a very affordable way that we can be very transparent that there's going to be a water tower here, so people go in with their eyes wide open. I've also had a discussion with Joel Dykstra, and he's committed to making sure that he's very transparent in the materials and the marketing materials and making sure people know that there's going to be a water tower there, just so people can make an informed decision, because that's going to protect all of us down the road. Some future council at some point, we can avoid having people say, I didn't know that was going to be there, because that's going to be a very tall structure. And so it's a very simple thing that we can do to save a lot of headache for people in the future. So I wanted to get those commitments and make sure this was on here so everybody knows about it. And I'm confident everybody's going to do what they need to do, because it's in the best interest of all parties. So just wanted to make sure I put that on record. Thanks.
We'll make note of that on the planning team, and we'll look into that. I think that's a great idea.
Thanks.
Other discussion amongst the council on this? All right, seeing no further discussion, let's call for a vote on this, please.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson? Kiley?
Yes.
Neitzer?
Yes.
Selberg?
All right, that item passes 7-0 on item 24.
Item 24 is a second reading. An ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the Code of Ordinances of the city by revising Section 37.038, lands included in Rural Service District. The Rural Service District shall include only those platted or unplatted lands as in the judgment of the City Council, are rural in character, are used or usable for agricultural, and are not developed for commercial, industrial, or urban residential purposes. The Rural Service District may include lands that are not contiguous to one another.
Good evening. As Tamara had indicated, there's 3 properties that are looking to go in what we call the Rural Service District Ordinance, 61, 62, and 63. They're located south of East 57th Street and west of Veterans Parkway. And as she indicated, these are properties that aren't used as commercial, industrial, or residential. They're currently just zoned ag, and they're going to be used for agricultural uses in the future. And so then they will be taxed as agricultural if approved tonight by the county. So.
All right, thanks, Jason. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this item tonight? All right, councilors, do you have questions for Jason on this? I'll look for a motion on it.
Move to approve, Erickson.
Second, Kiley?
All right, motion approved by Erickson, seconded by Kiley. Any discussion, council? We will vote, please.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kiley? Neisert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes. All right, that passes 7-0. Next item, please.
Item 29 is a resolution creating tax incremental district number 22, City of Sioux Falls. Item 30 is a resolution approving the project plan for tax incremental district number 22, City of Sioux Falls. And item 25 is a second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, establishing the tax increment revenues to be collected and authorizing the payment of tax increment revenues to C.R. Lloyd Associates Incorporated in accordance with the development agreement for tax incremental district number 22, City of Sioux Falls.
All right, just a note, we read each of these into the record together because they all go together. We'll vote on each of them separately. So, Jeff, good evening.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Council. Jeff Eckhoff, Planning and Development Services. So tonight, as the Mayor mentioned, and thank you for moving those agenda items around so we could look at this as a total package and do it in the order that it's supposed to be done by state law. Tonight's the second reading for the development agreement for the TIF and also the approval of the resolutions that have come from Planning Commission. So just to remind you of the steps, the Planning Commission is charged with determining the boundaries, the outline for the district, where the increment will come from, and where the improvements will be done within. And then they are responsible for approving or reviewing the project plan, what's going to be paid for within that TIF, which will be the parking ramp, the $21.5 million for the ramp, and then the financing charges that go with that. Those come to you from the Planning Commission as a recommendation to approve. And then tonight you'll also look at the second reading for the development agreement, which really outlines the size of the scope of the TIF and what things, the responsibilities and requirements that the developer has. Clearly makes it that it's a developer's TIF and they're responsible for the financing of that. There have been a couple questions on eligibility for a TIF, and just as a quick reminder, state law, South Dakota Codified Law, Chapter 11.9.8, talks about conditions for a TIF. It says the property, 25% of the property must be blighted, or 50% of the property within the district must stimulate and develop general economic welfare of the district and significantly enhance the value of all property in the district. And you'll see tonight in Dustin's presentation, certainly if you remember from the first reading, the amount of tax differences between pre and post TIF are significant in addition to the jobs and the investment. Dustin will walk you through all three items, kind of a brief overview of the boundary and the plan, and then get into more detail on the agreement again, so you can present and see the project in its entirety. Brendan Riley, as you remember, has been retained as outside counsel if you have any legal questions, and of course, Jake Kwasny is here from Lloyd if you have questions about the project. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dustin.
Thanks, Jeff. Good evening, Dustin.
Evening, Council. Dustin Powers with the Planning Department. Like Jeff said, over the next couple slides, I'm going to go through just the three items that you'll be voting on at tonight's City Council meeting. First is the proposed TIF 22 district boundary, which is item 29 on your agenda. The proposed boundary is a portion of Tract 1 of the Sioux Steel Addition and totals approximately 7.5 acres. The current area or the current district generates about $57,000 in current property taxes on an annual basis. The TIF request that's up for consideration tonight is for up to $21,508,407, plus the financing costs associated with the construction and the site preparations for the parking ramp that's needed to support the density of the proposed development. The details of that development agreement have been formalized and are part of item 25 on tonight's agenda. Following the improvements of the proposed project, an estimated $1.6 million will be collected as annual property taxes. So when we look at the two conditions, one, the existing condition, which is $57,000 in current taxes, to once the project completed, a significant increase to $1.6 million in annual property taxes collected for the property. During the life of the TIF, that $1.6 million, or the increment, is what will be used to reimburse the project costs associated with the construction of the parking ramp that's detailed in the development agreement. As Jeff stated, state law talks about what the requirements are in terms of whether the property is either blighted or will generate economic development and what that minimum requirement is. Based on the improvements that have been detailed at previous meetings, but are also outlined in the project plan that's on your agenda tonight, we definitely see that there's going to be a significant impact to the economic welfare of the state, as well as the city of Sioux Falls, and a substantial increase in the property valuation, thus meeting the requirements for creating a TIF district. South Dakota codified law also talks about what's required in a project plan. So as Jeff indicated, we did take the project plan in front of the Planning Commission, and they did recommend approval for your consideration here tonight. Some of the items that are addressed within that project plan are the improvements that will be occurring within the district, the economic feasibility of the TIF, which is essentially, are the improvements going to generate enough increment to pay off the cost of those improvements. A detailed list of those estimated project costs, both non-project costs, which are everything related to the development, as well as project costs that are allowed through codified law for the reimbursement through TIF. We also look at the fiscal impact on the taxing entities, so prior to the TIF being created and then after the dissolving of the district, which again was the two numbers that I compared previously. We also look at the methods of financing, which again, this is a developer-funded TIF. The reimbursement of the increment will go to pay back their financing cost and cost for construction related to the project. The plan also addresses existing uses of the site, which we all know is the Sioux Steel property in downtown. Also the proposed improvements that we've discussed at previous meetings, any proposed changes to either zoning or any other code requirements associated with the municipal code. This project is consistent with our 2025 downtown plan as well as our 2040 comprehensive plan, and as well with our within the regulations of the downtown PUD, which is the zoning district and the associated forms associated with that. So again, no request as part of this project to change any of the city ordinances, zoning, or building codes associated with the project. And again, a list of any of those project costs that are not being requested to be refunded. So again, this is a $185 million project. Again, the request is for the $21.5 million plus the financing cost. So item 30 on tonight's agenda is the resolution approving that project plan. Item 25 tonight outlines the details of the TIF request and formalizes that within a development agreement. Again, this will be a developer-funded TIF. The reimbursement will be limited to $21,508,407 plus 5% interest in the financing cost, or capped at the 5% financing cost. The developer will be required to complete the parking structure and submit actual construction costs to be reimbursed for those expenses. The parking will be available to the public, as well as consistent with our public parking operations. A little bit of what that means is that the developer will be leasing parking spaces in the ramp on a daily basis to the residential, the office space, the hotel guest, as well as using it for the convention space that they'll be having as part of this project as well. All of the non-lease spaces is what we're really talking about. So during the day, there's going to be a number of non-lease spaces that'll be available for the public that'll be able to use that consistent with how we'd use parking during the day, which is an hourly rate. And then on nights and weekends, those non-lease spaces would be available to the public for use for free. And again, we're making the requirement of the parking condition consistent with our then current requirements for our public parking system. So if those were to change in the future, they could be able to amend to be consistent with us so that we have one consistent approach across the parking system. The developer will also take reasonable steps to ensure that it maximizes the availability to the public within the parking facility. And the obligation of the public parking is in alignment with the length of the TIF, which is 20 years and would be expiring on March 1st of 2040. Again, the developer will be financially responsible for the financing for the parking structure as well as the repayment of those, the financing with the project. With that, we are looking at support for all three of those items, the two resolutions approving the boundary and the plan, as well as the ordinance approving the development agreement here tonight. With that, myself and Jeff are here from a staff perspective, and then again, Lloyd Companies is represented by Jake Kwasny here tonight too.
All right, thanks, Dustin. All right, I realize there's three items here that all kind of run together, so we'll take public input on the first item, item 29. and ask if anyone is here to speak on that item. All right, councilors, do you have any questions for Dustin on item 29, creating the district? Councilor Erickson.
I just have one question. When you were talking about the non-leased parking, are they required to keep a certain number of spaces for non-leased, or is it just whatever's available? Like, is there a minimum threshold?
We haven't outlined that in the development agreement. Obviously, Jake could probably talk a little bit more about this, but the ramp that they're going to be constructing is approximately 900 spaces, which is a surplus of what they're going to need on site on a daily basis. So we do know that there's going to be a surplus there during the daily hours, as well as obviously after hours. Once the office tenants leave, that's going to free up a major part of the parking ramp during the night and weekend hours. So.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And maybe if Jake has an idea of that, I'd ask Jake that. And while you're coming up, I just want to say thank you for your investment in all of the partners that are involved in this. This is a dynamic, just amazing development that really will bring a lot of people to the downtown area, and it will really pair nicely with the work that the city's going to be doing on the River Greenway to continue that down. So I just would ask about the non-leased. If you're thinking, is it going to be 300, 400, or what would be in the pot of non-leased parking, I guess? Because I know it's to your benefit to lease as many as you can as well.
Absolutely. And really, when we look at the lease spaces, it's to make sure that there's somewhere to park for those office tenants that invest in putting their space downtown, the people who choose to stay down there. So we worked with Walker. Obviously, they're the experts in parking structures, and there's a whole lot of actuary study on percentages of who's there during the day and when, but our numbers indicate that we have approximately 120 stalls over peak usage. So that means at its most on your average day, we should have somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 stalls that we need, and there should be 120 open. Now, if there's a show at the Levitt going and we have a event going at the event center, it's going to be packed, and that's a good day for everybody because that means there's a lot of people in downtown. So, and to your last part, I want to thank the city for working alongside us to do this. You know, I've been talking with each of you over the last year about this project, and you have a great staff in Dustin and Jeff. They really did. They got into this thing, into the weeds with us, and it was great to work through the project, and they're doing a great job to use the city's resources wisely. So we appreciate working with them.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jake. All right, any other questions for Dustin or the developer on item 29 here? If not, I'd look for a motion on it.
Move to approve, Brecky.
All right, I'm going to give that to Councilor Brecky to approve and seconded by Councilor Erickson. Any discussion, Council? All right, Councilor Kiley.
Thank you. As was mentioned, just to review a little bit of what was mentioned dating back to informational, the developers are already in $2 million just in plans in this already, so the $3 million. So it's escalated just in the few weeks that we've already discussed this. So they have made a major commitment to move forward with this, this project. And the TIF that they're requesting is entirely for the parking, the construction of the parking ramp that will have a public benefit, which, by the way, is less than half of what's eligible on this project for a TIF request. They technically could ask up to $50 million on this particular project. Yes, they're requesting less than half of that. It just makes sense to do it, not to even mention the revenue that this is going to generate from the hotels and from the apartments and from the shops and everything else that it's going to bring to the area. But based on the 2019 tax payment of just under $57,000, well, in 2040, the tax payment is going to escalate to over $2.5 million. So if we multiplied the under $57,000 a year that's paid for taxes on the property now, you come up to just over 1.1 million. So in 1 year, in 2040, that tax payment's going to escalate to $2.5 or over $2.5 million. So it's a good return on investment. As I've mentioned, there is definitely a public benefit because it provides the night, the weekend parking, and the non-lease daytime parking that Councilor Erickson was questioning. So there's no risk to the city in this, zero risk to the city. And other things, I could go on and on. I mean, because there's even going to be profits made from the construction, over $6 million in revenue just on construction materials alone. So this is a project that makes sense, and I encourage my colleagues to vote yes.
Councilor Selberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to probably just quickly reiterate what's already been said, but this is going to be a great return on the investment. I think it's going to be an amazing project and boon to the city. I think I'd reiterate what Councilor Erickson said. I want to thank everybody here for their continued investment, not just in our city, but in our downtown. I think that's gone on for years, and it's much appreciated. And I also want to tell you how much I appreciated walking us through the project and answering our questions and taking the time, because that's certainly, as we go through and look at things, projects like this and numbers, it's nice to kind of have our hand held and walk through it. So anyways, thanks for what you're doing on this. I'm much appreciated.
Councilor Neiser.
Yeah, just a couple points I wanted to make. Once again, thanks for the investment. Another thing that sometimes people maybe don't think about is parking ramps are infrastructure downtown. They're core infrastructure. Without parking ramps and parking, you cannot develop. So they are building infrastructure. The other thing is, sometimes there's criticism regarding our usage of TIF, and I will tell you that, first of all, we don't use it very often, and second of all, we're very, very selective on what things that we grant for reimbursement. As was stated, there's a lot more that we could approve them to be reimbursed for, but we don't do that. So we are very conservative in our usage of TIF, unlike sometimes other communities. So we're very selective. We look for these game-changing projects. I do have one question, and I think it would be for Dustin, and that would be related to the parking. One thing that I guess I would like to see, because we've done a TIF that related to parking before, was I'd like you to, maybe you have a comment on this, but I'd like you to at least think about it in the same with Lloyd, is what could you do in terms of with signage? Because I think in the past we've had other ones where I don't think it's obvious to the average person that the ramp is even available. And so I think it would be good if you could come to some way that we could use our city-branded parking thing to say, like, public parking available, maybe somewhere on the outside, and then potentially, if it works, have a dedicated number of spots maybe that have our emblem that say, available for public use. Because when I go to in another ramp, it's not immediately obvious to me that, number one, that it's available, and number two, where I would park. And so I think for us to get the most bang for the buck in terms of the public, I think kind of giving them some wayfinding, in a way that would work with their operations. If you could work together, that would be great. And I think that would be a benefit to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that we can, discuss with Jake and Lloyd and just kind of figure out the best way to create some wayfinding that gets people to the parking facility. Obviously, getting people to the parking is important, not just for the public's perspective of this TIF agreement, but also their project and getting the customers that are going to be attending the events, as well as the hotel and retail scene that they're going to generate on site there. So again, I think that's something that
could I see maybe if Jake has any commentary regarding if they've thought about that? I just think for many users, if they're not intimately familiar with the workings of downtown, they may not even know that it's available to them.
We're actually working on a comprehensive sign plan that considers things like that. It's crucial to the success of the businesses within our development, which is ultimately crucial to the success of our development, that people know how to navigate and get accustomed to parking in that structure and understanding how it works. So we absolutely are going to have wayfinding signage that we would love to have it play off of the public parking symbols, if we could, to the extent we can utilize that. As far as within the ramp, it gets really complicated if you start earmarking spots for people. So that's going to be a limited deal. Even for the office tenants, we're not going to be doing that. It's you pull in, you find your parking spot, and there's a system that manages the parking within that, what's available and what's not. So we probably won't have specific spots set aside for that, but it is crucial that we make sure it's as easy to use for the public as possible.
Okay, so you're not necessarily going to have spots that are earmarked there, that these are the least spots, these are our private tenants, and this is public. It's going to be kind of find a spot.
With a ramp that has to function for so many different uses, if we earmarked a spot that this one belongs to this office tenant, we'd never have the availability you need. So it's definitely gonna work the way that more urban parking lots do that work in a mixed-use community.
That makes they need to be dynamic, and that's totally fine. So interior, if that works for your operations, fine. But I would really encourage something on the exterior with our city signage that would just tell people you can also use this. That's all I would be asking for.
Absolutely, we want that because it's crucial to the success of the development.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks, Jake. Any other discussion amongst the council on item 29 here? All right, let's take a vote on this one, please.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes.
All right, that one passes 7-0. We're on item 30, which is the item approving the project plan for the TIF. And I look for a motion to approve this item.
Move to approve, Brecky.
I'll give that one to Councilor Selberg and second by Councilor Brecky on that. Discussion on this one, Council. All right, seeing none, we'll vote on this one, please.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes.
All right, that passes 7-0. And then we're on item 25, which is the actual TIF revenues, how they'll be collected and over the life of the TIF, and look for a motion on that one.
Move to approve. They want public input, sorry.
Public input, we read them all into the record together, so we had public input for the one item. They were read as one. Is that correct, Tom? Did I do that right? Am I supposed to take public input on each?
Yes, you're supposed to take it on each.
As in the past, it was the intent if we read them together, but I would assume if it's at the council's discretion.
Yeah. Mr. Zakaitis, if you care to speak on this, you can sure come forward. Good evening.
Greetings. I'm David Zakaitis, and I'm here to talk about this TIF. Very interesting topic. I want to think a little bit about what a TIF is and what it's traditionally for. Well, you got to understand the acronym, first of all. Tax Increment Financing. I don't want to spend too much time talking about the mechanism of a TIF because I only have 5 minutes. But generally when people talk about TIFs, they talk about them as a way to remove urban blight. That's mostly what people talk about. They talk a lot less about using a TIF for economic development, mostly about blight removal. So, urban renewal is a good thing to do, and economic growth is also a valuable thing to do. But TIFs have a problem whereby they reduce the money available for schools by allocating property tax resources for economic growth and blight removal. Now, I went over there to see what kind of blight we have, and I didn't see very much. Sioux Steel, it looks like an okay building from what you can tell from the outside. And the backyard of Sioux Steel just looks like commercial property. I did not see any blight. Thank you. Maybe it's hiding somewhere. Thank you. On the other hand, this structure looks like it's going to be a whole lot nicer than what's there. I'll grant you that. Now, I'm looking at TIFs, and traditionally what happens is people decide that this area of the city is no good and it needs some work. So they start with a TIF district, and then you get projects that support that TIF district. But that's not what Sioux Falls does. We find projects and support them with districts. Seems like we're getting things kind of backwards. So that leads me to wonder if the real goal is economic development or supporting the people that would benefit from the particular TIF. Of question that I do not have the answer to, but I do ask the question. I was doing a little bit of research this afternoon, and I came across this really nice article. It's 68 pages long, so I didn't get a chance to read it today, but I'm putting the citation up there to encourage everybody to take a look and to see what we could learn to maybe manage TIFs effectively and for the benefit of the city. And there you go. Oh, gotta have a nice scene to close. This is near Great Bear one foggy morning.
All right, thank you. Anyone else for public input then on this topic tonight? All right, then we'll move to a motion now, Council, if there's one to make on this.
Move to approve.
All right, I'll give that one to Kylie, and I'll second that to Councilor Brecky. Discussion on this one, Council. Councilor Brecky.
I would just like to close with a few comments. I get real excited about the aesthetics of the thing, and I reflect back to standing on, the observation tower at Falls Park, and I remember standing there with my dear friend Steve Metley, and we were so proud of what we had done, not he and I, but as the city at that point in reclaiming Falls Park, and to stand up from that and look over that view was just amazing. And if any of you know Steve, I'm standing there just taking in the view, and he's going, "We got to get rid of that railroad trestle. It's mucking up the view." And then I'm thinking there, oh my, that's going to be my job. And it was always pretty difficult to deal with the railroad because they've got a lot of power and they weren't very negotiable about things. And I noticed the trestle's still there. But I couldn't help but think tonight as I was thinking about this, I wish Craig Lloyd was here because I know he and Steve were very dear friends and very close. And of course he was swept away from us way too young. But I couldn't help but wonder what he would be saying, if he was sitting on, standing on that trestle or on that observation deck, from Falls Park looking over, what this view is going to do. And I've said it in previous informational briefings. This is going to change the skyline of our city. We're going to look right over that trestle. It still needs to be moved, but it's literally going to make a beautiful skyline for us. And I actually had a similar conversation with Craig Lloyd about that. And I said, "What do you think Steve would say?" And he said, "I think he'd say, 'What took you so long?'" So again, for any of us that knew him, he was a great visionary and started a lot of things, one of them being the River Greenway was his passion. And so to have this project, wrap that into it and really develop our skyline, it's just a huge, huge step in a right direction, direction that we need to go and that it's very exciting for us to go. So I thank you for the risks that you're assuming with this large project, and I'm glad to be a part of the council at a time when we can help.
All right, thanks, Councilor. Any other discussion amongst council on this? All right, we'll call for a vote, please.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes.
All right, that item passes 7-0. Item 26.
Item 26 is a second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the Chapter 38 of the Code of Ordinances of the city pertaining to elections.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Erickson.
Just want to make a few brief comments, and then also Tom and Councilor Kiley as well. This really, as we talk about the second reading, this only does two things. It removes the 60-day termination requirement, and then it also places the PACs on the same reporting schedule and timeline as candidate committees. This ordinance really is about transparency and consistency, more disclosures more frequently, requires municipal PACs to disclose significantly more than currently required, requires yearly disclosures for all active committees. Right now, it's only during election years. Consistency in the place that places city PACs on the same timeline as candidates, it's easier for everyone to track. More closely aligned with state law, particularly when it comes to the use of contributions by candidate campaign committees while reducing barriers to participate in our electoral process. We had a pretty lively discussion about this last time as well, and I would request your support on this and open to the conversation.
All right, thank you, Councilor. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this? Please come forward.
Greetings again. I'm still David Zokaitis, and I'm here to talk about campaign finance. The proposed change, a couple of things that can happen here. We're talking about campaign committees that can remain open indefinitely. And supposedly this will help to promote transparency because you won't need to put your unspent funds in a PAC. Political action committees are kind of hard to look into sometimes, so it's good to get rid of them. I'll agree with you there. But one of the maybe unintended consequences of this particular change is that it favors wealthy candidates, because poor candidates, they're going to spend all their money. They're not going to have anything left over. But if you've got a wealthy, well-subsidized candidate, he might have some money left over from the first campaign, and this change lets them keep it for the second campaign, and it'll be easier to run for re-election. So I want everybody to be aware of this perhaps unintended consequence. The proposal favors wealth. A different proposal would be to get rid of PACs entirely. They're hard to figure out what's going on. They're kind of hidden. If you really want to promote transparency, you would eliminate PACs altogether. And, you know, I like the idea of closing your campaign committee after the election so that everybody with the next election starts off with a clean slate. And then you could promote democracy with these kinds of changes. Oh, and at last go-around, Mayor Paul Tanakin said he was running for election. Well, you've got some competition. It'll be me. And that's all. Good evening.
All right. And I would remind you, David Z., based on that you are not able to use the dais per executive order for promotion of candidacy. So this will be the last time you'll be able to mention that from the podium.
Sure, it's true for both of us.
I don't speak from that podium, so
Okay.
that's just a reminder that that's the executive order. And so thank you for adhering to the rules of this chamber. So anyone else to speak on this item tonight? All right, seeing none. Council, do you have any questions for your colleague, for Tom? If not, I would entertain a motion. Councilor Brecky, you have a question for Tom?
I've got a question for Tom. Tom and I've had multiple visits over this last week. I took a deeper dive into it and had various lengthy conversations. Can you describe a little bit, and I did pass out to the council some old articles that you produced when we looked deeper into what happened in 2005 and 2007. And can you just briefly explain the history that we found as it relates to the reporting requirements? You know, what happened in 2005 and then 2007 and 2015, if you would.
Basically, the change 2005 and 2007 saw an increase in basically the size of our elections ordinance, particularly as it relates to campaign finance. 2005, I think they took a good shot at it and tried to increase some of the reporting. 2007, I think they went into it even deeper. In 2007, they essentially came up with the reporting system that we're somewhat familiar with now. We have 3 reports prior to an election, 1 after. But they also addressed other things in that particular ordinance, pulling a lot from state law, because if you recall back in 2007, 2008, really 2007, 2008, the state made a lot of changes with regard to campaign finance. From 2007 going into 2008, they made some additional changes just based on some experiences they learned from the 2008 election. And then over the course of the next really 10 years, there are about 4 different changes to the campaign finance ordinance. Really from 2009 to 2015, we had a requirement where elected officials, if you won an election, you would be able to maintain your candidate campaign committee. If you lost, you were required to terminate it. 2015, that requirement was extended to everyone to terminate, and this proposal tonight reverses that.
Okay. And then, you know, it's been mentioned that the PACs are removed. The PACs are still, a municipal PAC, a state PAC, and a campaign committee are still available for places to put money, campaign money, under this existing ordinance.
There's no change to that, correct?
And that's something that you and I discussed. We talked about removing municipal PACs altogether, but ran into the United States Constitution, who considers it free speech. And so we thought that that probably was not something that we would be able to do. So just wanted to clarify that.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Councilor Brecky. Any other questions for Tom before we let him go? All right.
Move to approve Erickson.
Second, Kylie.
All right, motion approved by Councilor Erickson and seconded by Councilor Kylie. Is there discussion, council, on this?
I'd like to make an amendment.
Councilor Brecky.
Before I make the amendment, I'd like to make a little presentation. Again, just going a little further into the discussion. You know, starting with this article, what I learned and what I was really looking at, again, initially I was really wondering if it might be wise to get rid of the municipal PAC altogether. And the whole issue that I was trying to frame my delving into this around was that issue of, you know, being able to easily track the money, because I think that's what the public wants. You can do some limits on the money, and I have a slide here that kind of shows the limits that are currently. If you would grab the one over there, yeah. You know, there are current restrictions on, if you look at the circle that's in red, you know, what, you know, we can do locally with regard to our money. So looking at that, and then just looking at, you know, after you kind of, if you're satisfied with the limitations that you've got on the money, then what you really want to look at, or what I wanted to look at, was focusing on, you know, making sure that it was reported enough, that it really was transparent, and that it really was something that, you know, those people who are interested in doing that can track. And not being able to limit the number of PACs, because of course that would have made it easier. Then you could just look at the campaign committees, and then you could just look at the state PACs, and then you would have, you know, just two places really to look. But now even though that we're doing this, there'll still be three places where money can be put. You can put it in a municipal PAC, you can put it in a state PAC, or now you'll be able to put it in a campaign committee, you know, for an indefinite period of time. And I spoke a little bit about that at the last meeting, and that did continue to trouble me, so I looked into that a little further. And again, if you look at the rules, you look at this next one, that was, you know, this one, or not the rules, I'm sorry, but these old articles from 2007 and 2008, and I did, you know, also track down some of the council members that were on the council. I talked to Dee Knutson, and while she didn't remember the details, she remembered that they had a lot of meetings. So it would seem during this period, that was the time they took the deepest dive into this and really discussed it. They had experts come in and talk about it, and really did, you know, look at, you know, what was the best, most transparent way of moving forward. If you go back to 2005, and again, you have two amendments before you, and I'm going to be proposing to amend one, but if that doesn't pass, then I have a second one. But there was a third one, and the third one was a return to quarterly reporting, which was occurring back in 2005. And initially I discussed that with Tom because I thought, well, now that the PACs are going to be open forever, and it appears that we're going to be, you know, putting money in them continuously, because that's what's being done right now. It would seem that maybe going back to the monthly reporting would have been a good idea, but that did seem kind of excessive as we worked through that. And when we looked, you know, at what happened then in 2008 and 7 when they studied it the most diligently, you know, that's where they came to what, you know, what they're doing right now. But again, I would remind everyone that back in that day, you know, they weren't doing continuously fundraising. So I want to just throw up this picture. Mayor, I hate to use you as an example, but since we're discussing it right now during this election cycle, I mean, you know, on your website, you have been fundraising, you know, for this, you know, an ongoing fundraising campaign with your PAC, you know, using your PAC as the place to put the money. So I understand, you know, why it makes sense to want to put it in, you know, in a campaign committee, and then just, you know, have no end to that, because you can continue to, you know, raise the money all the time that you're in office, or any of us could. You know, I could go ahead and open a campaign committee, a PAC committee tomorrow, and continue to fundraising the entire time I'm in office. I think it is important to know this is unprecedented. In Sioux Falls, and I did talk to the 3 living mayors, and my memory on the other mayors, the other 2 mayors I served under, none of them continued to campaign except for the year that they were, except for during the cycle, the election cycle that they're up for election. I think that's a trend around the country, that's what people do now, and so I don't know that there's anything that one can really do to stop that ongoing process, but it does really raise for me 2 things. I think there has to be some reporting requirements that really allow, that openness and that transparency. And so the proposal that I'm going to amend to will be the quarterly submission. And I really spent a lot of time spinning it around with Tom, and that was our favorite because it seemed like it was reasonable. It allows the public to track the money. It's not really an undue burden like the monthly one would be. My second choice would be the biannual submission. Again, these would be over and above, and different from what's laying before us tonight. But I think that we really arrived at the quarterly was our favorite, and so that's the one I would like to see us do. Excuse me. The other thing that I really struggled with was there being no termination, and the reason I struggled with there being no termination date was in part because of what had happened in the previous documents that Tom had showed us, that you had a lot of committees when there were times when they didn't have to terminate, the money just disappeared. There was no enforcement from the city attorney's office, and there were these campaign committees that just laid out there. And again, looking at a transparency thing, I thought, well, if someone was trying to track the money, they'd have all these sort of dead soldiers out there they were trying to navigate through that weren't active and that were just sitting there taking up space, if you will. And then there was no enforcement, so there was a lot of money that was just laying around, and that was given kind of why the reason was that we should just remove the termination agreement. But what I decided upon, I thought it would really be better if we just had the termination go with the duration of the term limits that you're in office. So I propose that we do it for 8 years, so you could run the 8-year period, and then at that 8 years, you'd have to use the three ways of disposing of it, or then you could still put it in, a municipal PAC or a state PAC. But to just leave it continuously, I think it clutters up the system, and I thought that, the 8 years, and then if someone wanted to, because after our term limits, you can still, sit out for a term and then rerun. I think this would allow you to do that, and then you could, then you would start it all over again, in that capacity. So I didn't see really any harm, from the 8-year termination thing, but I did see some harm from leaving it just completely endless. So the proposal I have before you that I would make a motion to amend is the one that says it's a quarterly submission, and I don't know if you want to put that up there, Tom. So I would move to amend pursuant to this language.
Second, Starr. All right, we have a motion by Councilor Brecky, seconded by Councilor Starr to amend the language per, do we need to read this into the record, Tamara, or per what's on the screen?
I can read it into the record.
Okay.
Quarterly submission during non-election years and termination, subsection 3. Municipal candidates, municipal candidate campaign committees, and municipal political action committees shall have submitted a finance disclosure report by 5 p.m. within 3 business days following and complete through A. December 31st of each year is deleted, replaced with the last business day of March, June, September, and December of each year. B. is deleted, the last business day of February preceding the election in an election year. C is amended to read the last Monday 1 week prior to any runoff election. And D, the third Monday of June following the election is replaced with a termination statement may be submitted at any time except that municipal candidates and municipal candidate campaign committee shall submit a termination statement no later than 8 years after submission of the statement of organization.
I would like to pass the gavel to Councilor Selberg on this, since I was brought up in this conversation, and address Councilor Brecky. Again, to reinforce the discussion last week, or last time we brought this up, a PAC and setting up a PAC is a result of the current law. So I have to set up a PAC if I have campaign dollars remaining. Running for office is also not a 6-month window before an election or a year. You're always running. You're always fundraising. So there's nothing nefarious about sending out a fundraising email 2 years before you may consider running again. So any indication or implication, I should say, that that's somehow we're above that in Sioux Falls is really, I take offense to that, because we're a 200,000 person, this is a big city, and these are big races. And so you're always in re-election mode. That's how it works. So I apologize if I should only be raising money, in your opinion, 6 months before an election, but that's not the landscape we live in. So you will see more fundraising emails from me this year. I will continue to do that, just like Senator Thune has a $13 million war chest, and he's not running, but I get constant emails from him because he's always raising funds. So that is the new normal in Sioux Falls. I think we all at this dais need to understand that and get used to that. So if I'm going to be called out as an example for fundraising when I shouldn't be, I don't subscribe to that argument. And there will be more fundraising from me in the year ahead for whatever office I may or may not pursue in the years ahead. I wish I didn't have to create a PAC. The laws that this body set required me to create a PAC. I think some of these changes will help with that, with the reporting. But to imply that there's only certain times we should be sending out fundraising solicitations, I don't subscribe to that. So that's my 2 cents on the issue. I don't have really any dog in the fight on these amendments. I'll let the council vote on those and let the chips fall where they may.
Any further discussion? Councilor Brecky?
Yes, if I said anything that I indicated that there was anything wrong, and I just said it's new, that this hasn't been done before, that it's unprecedented. So I'm not saying it's wrong, but what my focus was and is with the amendments is, I think that the reporting needs to change too. We need to engage in more reporting if that's the new normal. So if you took it that way, I didn't intend it that way, but I do think that my focus again was you can't, just like you just said, you can't put the toothpaste back in the bottle. I mean, fundraising is an ongoing process, as we move forward. But if you look at the history of this, and they, at one point they were quarterly, then they didn't. That was when fundraising wasn't going on, in perpetuity. So I think as we change, as we grow with that, then I think the transparency needs to grow with it as well. So I would ask you not to take it personal. It wasn't intended personal, but I think the reporting and some sort of termination process from a transparency standpoint is just something that needs to happen as well.
Councilor Sale?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions and one for Janet Brecky. Janet, could you give me some more information about municipal, state, federal PACs? Because we're going to regulate municipal PACs, and we certainly can't regulate a federal PAC on what they do and report with their money. So if I was to have any extra cash, would it benefit me to set up a municipal PAC, which is now regulated under these amendments, a federal PAC, a state PAC? Could you enlighten me a little bit on how those three entities work together?
Well, I think, I'd kind of refer to what Dick Gregerson said in this article. I mean, originally PACs kind of were developed as a result of the union's activity, and they were, it was a group voice, and that's been protected, it's been strongly protected by the United States Supreme Court, and it's been considered speech. It's a viewpoint protection. And so the right to have PACs is here, and it's here to stay. The municipal PAC would be the PAC you would set up if you were intending to run for a municipal position, because you would have that kind of a vision. That would be the vision. The state PAC, if you were having a broader vision, and those the idea, the concept behind the PACs was that those bodies of people, or those people that had those kinds of vision, whether it be federal, state, or local, were groups of people. But I would defer to Dick Gregerson's statement in the article that I put up there. Dick Gregerson, a lawyer with Woods Fuller, and again, this was back in 2008. He testified before the Public Policy Committee of the City Council, and he was, a lawyer and lobbyist for the City of Sioux Falls, told the Council's Public Service Committee on Monday that PACs originally were established to allow people with a common interest, such as unions, to pool money for the political process. But in South Dakota, wealthy individuals use PACs to circumvent contribution limits. So that's been something that's happened in South Dakota, and probably has happened in other places. So the true original definition of the PAC, or purpose of the PAC, has changed. And I think that's what the mayor was complaining about. There's this kind of aura about him, and he wants to get away from that, because when you set it up and the only person that's listed on it is yourself, and you're not really a group viewpoint, then there's some criticism of it.
A little deeper on that same question. If I'm a candidate for this office and I have extra money, why would I set up a municipal PAC versus a federal PAC, which then we don't regulate, and reporting periods, the federal PAC, because I might want to make a donation to Pat Paulson for president. Can you do that with a municipal PAC? Or are you only regulating, is a municipal PAC limited to municipal candidates only?
I don't know that I think it has to be that municipal vision.
Okay, thank you. I just have one more question,
I'm
if I can.
stepping a little beyond my realm on that as well.
If I could have Tom answer the question.
Tom probably knows better than I do.
Tom, you've been city clerk for a while now. Could you explain if you've seen any violations of the reporting rules, and how were they handled if there has been a violation, how they've been handled?
A violation would normally come in the form of having a late submission for something, and folks, if they're late, they have a $50 per day charge up to $3,000, and we send them a letter and they generally pay their fine.
Maybe I could answer it kind of in the reverse. When I asked a similar question, when I was thinking maybe it would be nice to just get rid of municipal PACs and again just have the other choices, what I was told was, well, then you're preventing a group who has a purely municipal vision, from and their vision would not fit within the definition and the parameters of state PAC, then they could not form a PAC. So does that help? That's kind of helped me understand it a little bit.
Councilor Kiley?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to address what this item brought forward by Councilor Erickson and myself does. It removes the 60-day termination requirement, so that what has happened to several of us on here does not happen again, which does not lead to the creation of the PACs. It's places the PACs and PACs that are in place then are registered at the city level on the same reporting timeline as a candidate committee. So that's where the increased transparency comes from and the consistency comes from. So PACs and candidate committees are the same. But if you have a candidate committee, as I did at the end of my last election term, this revision would not require me to terminate that committee, as I had to and then I had to put the money into a PAC because I didn't know what I was going to do at that particular time. So it required me to do that. So this lends to more transparency and consistency. And now to address the idea of quarterly reporting, I don't see the value in quarterly reporting. You might be able to sell me on your other proposal of biennial. In fact, the biennial reporting could potentially assist in people terminating some of their committees instead of just carrying them on year after year after year with no intention of running. But the idea, also that whole idea of terminating, I do have an issue with that. The period of 8 years, because that would have impacted counselors in the past that served an 8-year, 2 4-year terms for 8 consecutive years, sat out 2 years, and then ran yet again for an at-large position or for a district position. It would impact them. And I think the more you terminate and then reopen and terminate and reopen and also rename these candidate committees too, now you start losing the transparency. So I do have an issue with that requirement to terminate. And currently, there's no restriction when a candidate committee can be formed. So any restriction on when one can start could severely discourage people from exploring candidacy and possibly running in the future. And some individuals that do not have access to big donors may be hindered even further by the requirement of terminate because they need that long term period of time to collect money for their run for office. So I think there could be an unintended consequence for that as well too. So I cannot support the quarterly, the requirement to terminate. I would entertain, however, the biennial reporting.
Councilor Neitzer. Any change to campaign finance has unintended consequences. I remember years ago when McCain-Feingold passed, it put limits on hard and soft money. That's when you had the rise of the PACs, really. That's when they exploded. Any change you make is going to cause people to divert money in other directions. So you always have to be careful with this. I guess the concern I have here is a couple things. The quarterly reporting in off years just seems like a lot of administrative paperwork, frankly, for our clerks and for somebody that might just have an account open. The vast majority of people, if you look at it, they're just going to sit there. The accounts are just going to sit there. They have a little bit of money left in them. And let me just say, as somebody who's been a candidate, the idea that you can perfectly divine how much money that you're going to need for a campaign, you don't know, number one, how much you're going to raise. You don't know what is going to come in. You may send out fundraising letters and you think maybe you'll get some response and you don't know what you get. And then as the campaign goes along, you're always having to make decisions, how the campaign's going and what you think. And when you were forced to terminate your account, you are encouraged to either overspend, which who wants more spending on elections? That's going to make it harder on everybody. Or you have to terminate and you have to roll it into a PAC. So rather than, for example, if I had money left over after a campaign, if I was to donate it to another one, it would say Greg Neitzer for City Council donated it. It's just going to be some random PAC name, and the tracking of the money becomes harder and harder. So any arbitrary termination date for me is problematic because you're going to force the creation of PACs. You just are. And that's going to remove transparency. So I guess I have concerns about both of those. Now, Andrew, very frequent reporting, which we require as you're in an actual race and you're coming up to an election, really important. So everybody knows what's going on and they can make an informed decision before an election when they're about to cast a ballot. But 3 years before the next mayoral election, every quarter, you're going to have a lot of zero statements, zero statements, zero statements. It's just going to be a lot of paperwork.
Anybody else? So we would call for a vote on the amendment.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
No.
Kiley?
No.
Neitzert,
No.
Selberg,
No.
fails 4-3. Fails 4-3.
4-3, it failed. Okay. Any other amendments?
I would move, I would move to switch it to biannual submission during non-election years and termination. If Tamara could read that into the record.
We have a second?
Second, Star.
Okay. Motion by Brecky, second by Starr.
The second amendment is for biannual submission during non-election years and termination. Subsection 3D should read the last business day of June of each year. And E should read, a termination statement may be submitted at any time except that municipal candidates and municipal candidate campaign committees shall submit a termination statement no later than 8 years after submission of the statement of organization. And the word "and" in C is eliminated.
Councilor Brecky?
Just a brief statement in support. You know, if the concern is, you know, moving the money around, I mean, none of this really stops moving the money around. Just because you can continue, you know, a perpetual campaign committee, it doesn't mean that you can't still put money in a PAC and have 2 or 3 PACs and do different things with PACs. So I still think that, you know, again, my focus was to try to be able to track the money and as best people can, you know, to have the opportunity to be current on the money that's coming in. So this wasn't my first choice, but I think it's, again, I was convinced you probably wouldn't be interested in the monthly reporting that did go on from 2005 until 2008. And so quarterly just seemed reasonable to me, but I would be very pleased if we could just have the biannual.
Councilor Erickson.
I'm going to offer a substitute motion by deleting letter E.
Second.
If I can.
So we have a substitute motion by Erickson, seconded by Kylie.
And if I can, Mr. Chair, the intent behind this is if we don't want to see money shuffling, we should allow the money to stay where it's at. The most transparency exists when it's in the original account. I, for example, had to move money from my legislative PAC to my city council when I ran for that, and then I had to cancel that and move it back into a PAC. So if that happens, then I would move it back into a candidate and just leave it there. I have not done any additional fundraising, but that option is there for me, which maybe I would to support candidates in the future. I'm not quite sure. But this would essentially impact those that maybe run for mayor early on. This last cycle, we saw many people opening a report back in June, way before that. And so that 8-year term, they would essentially have to close out. For example, Mr. Z sitting here, same thing. He would have to close his because he opened his a significant amount in time in advance, whether he has funds or not or whatever, that's here nor there. It's the fact that he would have to close his as well. And so that is my amendment to remove that, to allow the money to just stay where it's at. If someone chooses to close it, they have that choice to close it, and they have the choice to open a PAC should they want to do that. If that's, I'll leave it at that.
Further discussion? Councilor Kiley?
I'd just like to reiterate what I've said before and what Councilor Erickson just said again. A requirement of terminating even after 8 years is going to result in the creation of a new candidate committee or a PAC. So you lose that transparency with that clause. So I support the elimination of E. I can support the idea of reporting on a biennial basis.
Councilor Brecky?
Just a quick response, and that is, there is the clutter then. You know, there is that clutter of those that right now there's something associated with Kenny Anderson out there. Sue Aguilar just terminated one that'd been around for years. And how many of those that nobody even does anything with, you know, just kind of lay around out there in order to clutter up the field. So I've already said that, but I would just reiterate that was one of the things I was trying to achieve by having a delayed termination. I don't think it's going to affect that many people that are going to rerun, and it doesn't necessarily mean they have to get rid of their money. They can just move their money into a PAC. So.
Anybody else? So we would call for a vote on the amended motion, correct?
Yeah.
Motion. Are you ready?
Pardon me?
Councilmember Sale?
Excuse me, I have a question. What, are we voting on the deletion of E?
Yes.
And the biannual, or just?
It was essentially an amendment to the amendment, so you're voting right now on the deletion of E, and then next you'll have to vote on the amended amendment, and then after that on the amended main motion. So the vote right now is on the deletion of E to this amendment.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
No.
Brecky?
No.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes.
Okay, so it passes 5-2.
Passes 5-2. I'll vote on the amended. Amended?
Correct.
Amended motion.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes. That passes 7-0. Now we'll vote on the main motion as amended.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes. That passes 7-0.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Marshall. We'll move on to our next item, item 27.
Item 27 is a first reading. An ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, providing a provisional one-time supplemental appropriation for expenditure of police overtime pay for 2020 special events. Recommendation set a date of second reading for Tuesday, February 11th, 2020.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Erickson.
Councilor Neitzert and I are going to kind of tag team this back and forth before we turn it over to public input. Back on November 18th, the City Council was presented by the administration a cost recovery fee program for nonprofit special events. During that time, there was a defined deadline that implementation would take place on January 1st. Obviously, we're past that time. During that meeting, many councilors experienced concerns with the current practice of our officers being taken away from daily duties to staff these nonprofit special events and flexing their time. However, I felt the proposal went a little bit too far, burdening our volunteer nonprofit events with a cost recover model that could reduce the number of events that our citizens have grown to enjoy throughout the year. This ordinance is in response to that, and I would turn the rest of my time to Councilor Neitzert.
Councilor Neitzert.
This is an opportunity for this council to once again demonstrate its support for the police. This is a pro-officer and pro-public safety ordinance. One thing we all agree on as a council is police should work their assigned duties. We don't want patrol officers and school resource officers pulled off their important duties to work at special events. By providing funds for overtime, we will allow officers to voluntarily take overtime to cover those special events. This will make Sioux Falls safer by keeping officers on their assigned duties, keep their schedules more consistent, which is going to help their morale, and give other officers the opportunity for more overtime, another morale boost. It's a win-win for our officers, the public, and our valued special events. Thank you.
I'll just finish by saying we're happy to bring forth this appropriation as we've all talked about what this potential ordinance would mean. I understand the administration will be bringing forth changes in the future, and it allows that time to research, dive in, and take place. I also want to mention that we clearly know that this mayor and the chief are huge public safety proponents, and thank them for their efforts throughout the years in protecting and promoting our police officers. And I would be happy to answer any questions that we have as well.
All right, thank you, councilors. Anyone here for public input on this topic tonight? Good evening.
Boss, I wouldn't go to say that the mayor and the chief go to the extent of their police officers, because when I talk to these police officers on the streets, and I got recordings for that, they're getting pulled in every direction. We are on the back burner with Street Crimes Unit because they're getting pulled in every direction. Challenge me on it, because I got it. This police department is getting pulled in every direction. If we're going to do this as an ordinance to maintain the rich people downtown's events, then we need to do that for all the police department. So all the police department can stay on task and not get pulled because we're on the back burner on high priority calls. And I would challenge the mayor and the chief of police, because I have every telephone conversation, that they're getting pulled. And our top priorities are getting on the back burner, especially with this human trafficking. So I'm supporting this ordinance, but we need to come up with some more ordinances on keeping the police and not pulling them from one project to another project to another project, so we can keep crime on the streets handled appropriately and not put it on the back burner.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak on this topic tonight? All right, councilors, do you have any? Well, let's go ahead and put a motion on the floor.
Move to approve, Erickson.
Second, Nitzert.
All right, motion approved by Councilor Erickson, and that's to set a date, a second reading for Tuesday, February 11th, seconded by Councilor Nitzert. Discussion amongst the council on this. Councilor Selberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can appreciate the effort here. My question just to verify for the public and those watching. So this does not derail any previous efforts on studying the issue further, making any improvements on this issue, on some of the things that have been talked about over the last couple of months. This is kind of it helping along, but this doesn't take the place of, derail what's been done. That's my
correct.
understanding, correct?
That does not take the place of it. You are correct. This just simply allows the officers to maintain their duties where they're at while the issue can be studied further and solutions can be presented. I firmly believe that it was with good intentions for this originally being brought forward. It just got pulled back for the time being to continue to study it. But I truly believe that it was brought forward with good intentions. It was just a matter of what does that look like? And so one of the things that I kept hearing over and over and over was, we don't want the officers to be pulled from schools and their daily duties. So let's just offer that for the overtime for the time being until those changes could be made, whatever they may be.
Thank you.
Councilor Brecky.
Do have a question for the chief. Just a couple of questions. A similar issue came up a while ago about potholes, and there was a resolution brought forward that we should, add some money to the budget because we needed to do extra pothole maintenance. But at that time, the decision was made, we should just wait and see if there's enough budget, if it can be handled in our current budget. There was no budget shortfall. There was money in maintenance. And we never did have anybody come back to us. That was voted down. I voted it down because there was money in the budget for it. You've got an overtime budget. Can you handle this in your budget? And should we be waiting and doing this, just allowing you to do this, and then if you have a budget shortfall to top off your budget, or is it necessary that we do it right now this way?
So, Police Chief Matt Burns, thank you for that question, Counselor. We do have a significant overtime budget. However, when we are in somewhat of a environment where we have some seats that need to be filled and unfilled positions, that overtime budget has been taxed somewhat with higher backs to maintain minimum shift staffing. So I certainly appreciate this gesture. I think it can support us, it can help us. It's an open question to see whether we'll actually need it, but I definitely appreciate its being there. We were asked to identify a gap, and we did identify that, brought it to the council to try to come up with a resolution, and this is what's being brought forward, and we certainly appreciate the support.
The positions that aren't filled, and I don't know the answer to this, so if you even can do this, could you, because the positions that aren't filled, that's money that's budgeted, salaries that's budgeted. Could that money be used to fill the void for the overtime budget?
In fact, it's largely what is paid for the overtime is the wage savings.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions for the chief while we have him up here? All right. Thank you, Chief. Any other discussion amongst the council on this item? Counselor Starr?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my question for the sponsors is where's the money coming from? So we're taking this money out of reserves, I would believe, or is this the money that was left over from the budget in 19?
So as you, thanks for the question. As you heard Police Chief say that there could be some potential wage savings based on the non-hires. As you know, we have such a challenge with getting all the officers through the training schedules. And so there could be some wage savings there. This ordinance proposal is similar to the snow one. It's provisional. So we give X amount of dollars, hoping and praying that we don't need the extra money for snow. If we do, it's there. This is similar to that. It's provisional in that if they need it, it's there for those events. The events may vary as well from not needing as much depending on how many events, but as we've seen the trend upward, that's where it may or may not be needed. Just to go into a little bit of the reserve, in the budget of 2019, the expected reserve, as you know, we need to have it be at 25% per the policy that this council set forward years and years ago. The projection was to have it be at 31.5% ending, based on our budget analyst who went in and did projections based on every monthly report that we get. His estimate is 34.7%. Now that is not from the finance department, that's from our budget analyst, and that's simply based on our monthly projections of where we see the money landing. So if you take that $300,000 out of that surplus, we won't even be below 34%. It won't even take that amount based on that. We should have the numbers here in, I know there's unaudited and audited, so we should have those numbers within the next few months. We just got the CIP, so I'd expect the other ones to be in the not too distant future.
Thank you. If I could, Mr. Mayor, I had one more question. If we're going to do this, it makes sense to me that we also at the same time put a committee together of the council, an ad hoc group, to study the situation, not just throw the money at it, but to have a group, and when that time comes, I'm willing to serve on that committee.
All right. Thank you, Councilor Starr. Other discussion, council, on this item? Councilor Brecky?
Yeah, I am going to go ahead and vote for it because I don't want to be the one that votes against the police. But it is interesting that we're at the beginning of the budget cycle, and we're right. I mean, this is the 2020 budget we just started, and we're going to beef up the budget when we could be just using this money, and they might not need it. We're a long ways from the end of the budget, so I just have that concern about what we're doing.
All right, thank you, Councilor. All right, seeing no further discussion, I'll call for a vote on this one, please.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzert?
Yes.
Hellberg?
Yes.
All right, that passes 7-0. We'll move to item 28.
Item 28 is a first reading and ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the Code of Ordinances of the city by revising Section 95.71, Recreation Activity and Facility Fees of Chapter 95, Parks and Recreation. Recommendation set a date of second reading for Tuesday, February 11th.
Hi, Jackie.
Good evening. Jackie Nelson, Administrative Manager, Parks and Recreation. So tonight I'm here to talk to you about some general maintenance and some changes to fees within our Ordinance 95. So we were here in November as part of that special events informational. So now we're back to present to you for future approval next week. So to begin, with Ordinance 95 and the fees, all we're doing is, as I said, some general maintenance, really updating the ordinance to reflect some fees that are no longer applicable, as well as fees that are currently not in the ordinance. In terms of removing or cleaning up, we're removing the Sioux Falls Ice and Rec Center fees. As you all know, the Shields Iceplex has been around now for a few years, and we no longer have the Sioux Falls Ice and Rec Center. So just removing those fees within the ordinance. We're also removing some participant fees for programs that are no longer active within our recreation programs as well. In terms of additions, we are adding Lighting of the Falls, which has been a fee we've been charging for a few years now. However, have noticed that there was an oversight and it was not within the Ordinance 95 for rec fees. So we wanted to make sure we got that in the ordinance, as well as establishing Levitt Shell facility use fees Now that the Levitt is up and running and we're starting our second year, we wanted to make sure that those fees were added so we could start renting that facility out this summer. So primarily, the rest of this presentation will focus on the Levitt Shell facility use fees. So as a reminder, the Levitt Shell, as you all know, it's a state-of-the-art professional outdoor event venue located in downtown at Falls Park. It was a $5 million investment and is a partnership between the city, the local Friends of Levitt Shell Sioux Falls, and the National Mortimer and Mimi Levitt Foundation. Again, the Levitt Shell is the home venue for the Levitt Concert Series every summer. As we look at facility use for the Levitt, the first priority per our city contract would be the Levitt Concert Series. So within the 365 days in a year, the Levitt does have priority of 80 days between May 1st and December 31st. Second priority would be city programming. So within our Parks and Rec programming, different activities that we'll be offering throughout the given year. And then third priority, and that's why I'm here today, would be for public special events. So events for public use that would be scheduled through our current city special events application process. So very similar to how we would schedule or work with applicants for any other special events across the city, the same would hold true for the Levitt. So in looking at facility use fees, we did look at multiple comparable venues. I just have 3 listed, however, we did have quite a few that we did research. In terms of who researched these, city park staff, along with the Levitt team, we meet bi-weekly throughout the course of the year, and throughout our bi-weekly meetings, we have talked about different venues and different locations and how they compare to Sioux Falls and how the fees would ultimately work as we look at Sioux Falls. So a couple of venues that you see on your screen. The first one is the Levitt, Arlington, Texas. This is the Levitt facility that's the most like Sioux Falls. So, there's multiple Levitt venues. However, the National Levitt Foundation would say Levitt Arlington is really the one that Sioux Falls should base themselves off of. Even in terms of a design, we're designed a lot like the Levitt Arlington. Their seating capacity is also 5,000, similar to us. Their rental fee starts at $300, but then goes up to $6,500 depending on attendance, as well as if you're a resident or non-resident. They also then have applicable permits for sound, lighting, and other things. Pinewood Bowl in Lincoln, Nebraska, this is located in Pioneer Park, so this also would be ran through their city parks and rec. And I should mention the Arlington, Arlington Levitt is also ran through their parks and rec department. Pinewood Bowl in Lincoln, Nebraska is ran through their parks and rec. Their seating capacity is 4,000 seated, up to 5,200 general admission, so standing. They have a $100 application fee along with $100 per hour for a 6-hour minimum. So you're looking at approximately $700 to start, and that's just for 6 hours. And again, there too, they do have applicable permits for different sound and lighting, food trucks, things like that. The next one on the screen is in Des Moines, Iowa. That's the Simon Estates Amphitheater. Seating capacity here is a lot less, but I liked this venue just because of the lawn seating and the similarity of the venue itself. This one is a $550 4-hour time block with $100 thereafter for free events, and then it does bump up if it's a fee-based event to $800 for a 4-hour time block and $175 thereafter. And again, similar to the others, all the additional city permit fees, sound and lighting fees, things like that do apply. So for the Levitt, what we're currently looking and proposing to you would be based on attendance. So starting at 1 up to 499, a rate of $600, all the way up to 3,500 based on attendance of 4,000 to 5,000. Again, these fees are very similar primarily to the other Levitt venues, but as you can see, consistent to some of the other regional venues we have around Sioux Falls as well. These again would just be the use of the facility. Again, we would have those applicable additional fees as well for your different permits, sound lighting, for instance, fencing, things like that. Very similar to how other special events within Sioux Falls run today as well. And with that, I'll open it up for questions. And I do have Nancy Halverson with me, the Executive Director for the Levitt Sioux Falls, in case you have any Levitt questions.
Thank you, Jackie. Appreciate it. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this topic tonight? All right, counselors, do you have any questions for Nancy or for Jackie on this? Counselor Neitzer?
Jackie may be able to handle this. So when you say use of the facility, so I rent it on a Wednesday night and on Levitt night, what do I get besides the facility?
So you would
for
have
the fee?
so you would have the lawn, the stage area, and then, all of the electrical, outlets. In terms of specific sound and lighting, that would be an additional fee that you would work through the Levitt on. So ultimately, it would be that the stage, the shell itself, and the lawn.
And will the organizer be responsible for all of the logistics in terms of having security and all of those things? The Parks Department, we're not doing that?
We're not doing that. So it would be handled very similar to any other special event. So the organizer would meet with Kathy, who runs our special events through Parks and Rec, and then based on the needs and the logistics of the event, we would pull in other event committee members. With it being the Levitt facility, Nancy or a representative from the Levitt would always be a part of those event meetings as well.
Can they rent the equipment from the Levitt, the sound equipment, or do they have to bring in their own?
Nope, all sound and lighting for, if you want professional lighting, professional sound, that will be handled through the Levitt.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Counselor Kiley.
It's been a number of months ago, maybe a year ago already, that I approached Parks Director Don Kearney on behalf of several of our veterans organizations here about lighting of the falls on patriotic holidays, and we have a number of those. So I see, one of the things you have added here is a fee for lighting of the falls. So how do we determine which dates are the responsibility of the city and not an outside organization? And have you identified those dates?
So right now we have identified some of those specific veterans holidays that we as a city department have lit the falls on our behalf at no charge. So really it just becomes if it's more of a for-profit business or a nonprofit business, depending on the event itself. They work with Kathy again within our special events to determine what the specific need is, but for the veterans that we handle at the city level.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, council? I'd love to see a motion for second reading for Tuesday, February 11.
Move to approve.
Second, Neitzer.
All right, motion on that by Counselor Kiley and seconded by Neitzer. Any discussion amongst the council? All right, we'll take a vote on that, please.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kiley?
Yes.
Neitzer?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes. All right, that passes 7-0. We're on to our next item.
Item 31 is a resolution of the City of Sioux Falls approving the preliminary plan of Golden Gateway Edition.
Welcome back, sir.
Thank you. Excuse me, I'll be real brief on this. This is the preliminary subdivision plan that went along with the rezoning that we heard earlier. This is just the first step in the subdivision process and the first step for them to start constructing those sewer lines over to Canterbury Heights.
Thanks, Jason. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this item tonight? All right, councilors, do you have any questions for Jason on this?
Move approval.
Second, Erickson.
Motion approved by Selberg, seconded by Erickson. Any discussion, council? All right, we'll take a vote on this, please.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kiley?
Yes.
Neitzer?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes. All right, that passes 7-0. Item 32.
Item 32 is a resolution removing uncollectible delinquent accounts from the records.
Sean, good evening.
Good evening, Sean Pritchard, Director of Finance. So the resolution before you this evening is an annual resolution we do. It involves any accounts that are over $5,000. The ordinance 30.028 allows the Director of Finance to handle all those that are less than $5,000. There are two of them. Over $5,000 this evening that are before you. They are both related to our housing division. One is related to a bankruptcy for about $6,500, and the other is related to a foreclosure of $21,000. We're asking you to allow those to be written off the books so as part of our closing of the year. Thanks.
Thanks, Sean. Anyone from the public here to speak on this item tonight? Councilors, you got any questions for Sean on this? Councilor Neitzer?
Is this an issue where we're the second or junior and we get wiped out by the primary during a foreclosure?
That is correct.
So we have no right to recoup it anyway?
Correct, yep. One is a foreclosure action, the other one is a bankruptcy, but I believe
Either way, they've been discharged.
Soft second liens, yes.
Okay, thanks. Yep.
Any other questions for Sean on this? Councilor Erickson?
I just wanted to note that Councilor Starr did not recuse himself. He's still not feeling well, and so he excused himself for the evening. I just didn't want anyone to think he was recusing himself, so.
Got it. Thank you for that.
Move to approve.
Okay.
Second, Kylie.
Motion approved by Erickson, seconded by Kylie. Any other discussion? Let's vote on this, please.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes.
All right, that passes 6-0. Item 33.
Item 33 is a resolution including certain contiguous territory within the corporate limits of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Annexation 11529-2019, Track 2, Friends Edition.
The applicant and owner here is Sanford Health. This is a petition annexation by them. It's located north of East 57th Street and east of South Veterans Parkway. It's roughly 49 acres in size. The purpose of this annexation is they're going to combine it with the parcels they own to the west and then get it for future development.
All right, thanks, Jason. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this one tonight? Councilors, do you have any questions for Jason on this item?
Move to approve, Erickson.
Second, Selberg.
All right, motion approved by Erickson, seconded by Selberg. Discussion, council? All right, we'll vote on it, please.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson? Yes. Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes.
All right, that passes 6-0. We're on item 34.
Item 34 is a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into Amendment 1 to Gulf Facilities Management Agreement between the City of Sioux Falls and Landscapes Management Company, LLC.
Mr. Mayor?
Good evening, Don. Yes, Councilor Neitzert.
I have a family member who works for Landscapes Unlimited, so I need to recuse myself.
All right. Dropping like flies, Don. You got 5 votes you got to get here.
One more. Don Kearney with Parks and Recreation. Good evening, City Council members, Mayor. This contract amendment really is generated as a result of the City of Brandon reevaluating the golf course operations. As a result of their efforts to do that, they did approach Landscapes Management about potentially helping them in that evaluation of their course operations. As we mentioned at last week's informational, our contract with Landscapes does have a non-compete clause that would prohibit them from being able to provide those services to the City of Brandon due to their proximity within 20 miles of our city courses. Obviously, Landscapes is interested in working with the City of Brandon, but obviously want our support and blessing through a contract amendment that would allow them to do so. Some of the things that we looked at from our perspective, obviously we wanted to make sure we're taking care of our own. Really believe there's some cross-promotional opportunities between the courses. I believe there's some added values to our city pass holders. Also think that, obviously we work closely with other municipalities in the area, whether it be surplusing items to them or whatever it might be. And so this is just another example working with other municipalities. And I think ultimately we hope that both the City of Brandon's course and the city courses would also benefit with more rounds and revenue. So as proposed, this is the section of the agreement they're proposing to amend, which simply adds, with the exception of the City of Brandon, and we're only accepting that one course. The other thing that it would do is that requires them to hire their own management for the City of Brandon and not use our Sioux Falls golf team to provide those services. And then if they do decide to hire a staff member that currently is on Sioux Falls golf team, we would just ask that they run that by us and ask for our approval prior to that happening. So with that, I have Justin Arlt. Justin's our market manager for our Sioux Falls courses, as well as the regional manager with Landscapes Management, Chris Jacobson, in the audience with us tonight as well. So glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Don. Anyone from the public here to speak on this item tonight? Councilors, do you have any questions for Don or for the folks from Landscape? Kurt?
Yes, if I could get Justin, I have a question on the contract. Will you then be doing the events in the Brandon Golf Course and the dinners and My daughter had a wedding dance at the Brandon Golf Course. Will you be providing all the management and event staff for that?
That would be remain to be seen pending the RFP process that the city of Brandon would enter into. I think what I would do is probably lean on Chris Jacobson, the regional manager, probably to answer that question a little better, as well as any others that the council may have.
Thanks, Justin. Chris, you want to come on up and take a stab at that regarding who will operate the kind of the event side of Brandon, which I know a lot of people have events out there.
Yeah, you know, currently this is going to be a consulting deal to start with, so we're just going to be providing some oversight, some business development for them, for their on-site team, kind of a game plan per se, business plan. And then the RFP process might get into a management agreement later, but we don't have, it's not yet. But right now it would be nobody from the city. They would be running their own operations and we would be responsible for that oversight, so.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Any other question for Chris while we got him here? Councilor Selberg.
And just to reiterate for the public, we talked about this in the informational. I mean, some people might go, well, geez, that's going to be pulling people from Sioux Falls golf, and isn't that the reason why we have these contracts? But I think, Don, what was the stats that you ran? I think people would be surprised as far as the cross streams or people that golf from here to Brandon really isn't that many, correct? Remember the stat we were talking about?
Yeah, one of the things when we were doing our due diligence on this particular item, I asked Justin to pull how many members from Brandon are members in Sioux Falls, and there was one member from Brandon. So,
Thank you. Thanks, Don. Other questions, council, on this? Look for a motion on it.
Move to approve.
Second, Selberg.
Motion approved by Kiley, seconded by Selberg. Any discussion, council? All right, we'll take a vote on this, please.
Councilmember Sale?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson? Kiley?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes. All right, that passes 5-0. Councilor Selberg, you want to grab Councilor Nitzert if he's still hanging back there? Councilor Kiley, please. We'll move on to our next item, item 35.
Item 35 is Charter Revision Commission Summary Report.
And just to note on this, there'll be no action from the council on this. This is purely a report from the Charter Revision Commission. And we have our chair of that commission, Justin Smith. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the Sioux Falls City Council, my name is Justin Smith. I am an attorney here in Sioux Falls, and I am honored to be the chairman of the Sioux Falls Charter Revision Commission. You should have in your packets a copy of the summary report from the Charter Revision Commission. We met throughout the summer and fall of 2019. We heard from multiple residents in Sioux Falls with proposed amendments to our city charter. Each and every proposal was added to our docket and was the subject of specific discussion and individual vote on whether to place it on the ballot. This process was transparent and allowed public participation and input in the discussion and the ultimate decision. Ultimately, the Commission voted unanimously to place two proposed amendments on the 2020 municipal ballot. First, in Section 2.02B of the City Charter, add an eligibility requirement for council seats with a district. Such a candidate must be a resident of the pertinent district for at least 6 months immediately prior to the election. In Section 8.01D of the Charter, the second change would propose that we set the standards for citizen petitions to amend the Charter, clarifying such a citizen group must comply with the most stringent signature requirements, whether at the state level or at the local level. Those are in the packet, along with the summary report from the Charter Revision Commission. These two proposed amendments to the Charter represent timely, reasoned, and limited amendments to the foundational document of our municipal law in Sioux Falls, and we recommend approval by the voters. These were two of a long list of proposed amendments to the Charter introduced by members of the public, some of which would have called for a vote on very broad changes to the structure of how our government works in Sioux Falls. I do want to thank the mayor and the council for the confidence placed in the commission and its members. Thank my fellow commissioners for electing me as the chairman of the commission. And in a special way, I want to give a thanks to our outgoing commissioners, Pauline Politis and Bob Timian, for their years of service to the city on the Sioux Falls Charter Revision Commission. If there are any questions of the council or Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any of those.
Thank you, Justin. I will let the council, do you have any questions you have of Justin on this? Councilor Nitzert.
I just want to thank you and your members for your service. It was rather lengthy, and you don't get paid enough. Thanks.
I would echo that too. Thank you for the volunteer time you put in on this. And I know as an attorney, you're busy and have a lot of demands on your time. So thanks for serving in that role. All right. Appreciate it, Justin. Is there any new business, council? All right. Motion adjourned by Erickson and seconded by Kylie. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed? All right. We are adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.